Most people say they want secure love, a love that feels safe, a love that doesn't disappear when things get uncomfortable, a love that doesn't punish honesty or withdraw at the first sign of vulnerability. But few people ask the deeper question, am I becoming the kind of person who can receive that kind of love? Because secure love is not something we chase, it is something that recognizes us, and when we are ready, many of us grew up learning that love must be earned, that our needs are too much. That silence is safer than truth. That being strong means not feeling. So we become adults with impressive survival skills, but fragile emotional roots. We want connection, yet we are afraid of it. We crave closeness, yet tense when it arrives. We long to be seen, yet hide when someone truly looks at us. Emotional maturity is not about becoming perfect, it is about becoming honest. It is the slow, brave decision to stop abandoning yourself just to be chosen. And that decision changes everything. Emotional maturity begins the moment you stop asking, why do I always attract the wrong people? And start asking, what inside me is still waiting to be held with care? Because the relationships we enter are not random, they are familiar. They echo the emotional climate we learned in childhood, the tone of the rooms we grew up in, the way love was offered or withheld. If love once came mixed with fear, your nervous system may confuse intensity with intimacy. If you had to perform to be accepted, you may feel unworthy when someone loves you easily. If your emotions were ignored, you may now ignore them too, until they speak through anxiety, distance, or exhaustion. Emotional immaturity is not a flaw, it is a memory, a body that learned to survive without safety. But maturity begins when we stop blaming the past and start listening to what it left behind. It means noticing when you shut down instead of speaking, when you explain instead of feeling, when you joke instead of grieving, when you chase instead of choosing. Secure love does not thrive in chaos. It grows in presence. It grows when your no is honest, when your yes is unforced, when your boundaries are gentle but firm, when your emotions are allowed to exist without apology. The partner you desire is not looking for perfection. They are looking for availability. Not someone who never hurts, but someone who stays present when pain appears. Not someone who never fears, but someone who does not let fear decide. And that kind of person is not built through motivation. They are built through tenderness, through small daily acts of self-respect, through the courage to feel what was once unsafe to feel, through learning to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. This is how emotional maturity is grown, not loudly, but deeply. Let's talk about some practical steps to cultivate emotional maturity and attract secure love. First thing is, learn to pause before you protect. Most of what we call personality is often protection learned too early. The sharp reply, the sudden silence, the need to explain, the urge to withdraw, the tightening in the chest before the mind even understands what happened. These are not character flaws. They are memories living in the nervous system. Long before you had language for fear, your body learned how to survive it. So now, when someone raises their voice or misunderstands you or simply feels distant for a moment, something ancient wakes up inside you. Not a thought, a sensation, a tightening, a warning that says, this is where it hurts, this is where you disappear, this is where you are not safe. And in that instant, can protection arrives faster than awareness? You defend, you shut down. You become reasonable, you become cold, you become strong, not because you want to, but because once it was necessary. The pause is the most radical act you can learn. It is the moment you tell your body, we are not there anymore. It is the breath that interrupts history. In that pause, you may feel discomfort rise, a heat in the face, a pressure behind the eyes, a trembling in the stomach. These sensations are the language of a younger part of you, one that never learned that conflict can be safe, that love can stay, that being seen does not always lead to being hurt. To pause is to stay present with that child for a few seconds longer than usual, not to fix them, not to silence them, but to listen. You begin to notice that what feels like danger is often vulnerability asking for care, that what feels like anger is often grief that never had permission to speak, that what feels like control is often terror of being left again. When you pause, you stop handing the steering wheel to old pain. You allow choice to exist where reflex once ruled. You create a small space between the wound and the response, And in that space, something gentle becomes possible. You might still speak firmly. You might still set a boundary. You might still say no, but it will come from the present, not the past, from clarity, not panic, from self-respect, not self-defense. This is how emotional maturity grows, not by becoming harder, but by becoming slow enough to feel what is actually happening inside you before it decides your future for you. And slowly, your relationships begin to change, not because others become perfect, but because your pain is no longer the one speaking first. And when pain is no longer leading, love finally gets a voice. Second thing is, name your emotions without judging them. Many of us were taught that emotions are problems to solve, not experiences to listen to. So we learn to translate feeling into thinking. We explain instead of sensing. We analyze instead of allowing. We justify instead of admitting. And slowly, without realizing it, we become strangers to our own inner world. When a feeling rises, the mind rushes in with judgments. This is stupid. I shouldn't feel this. Others have it worse. I'm being dramatic. I'm too sensitive. These sentences may sound adult, but they were learned early. They are echoes of rooms where emotions were inconvenient, of faces that turned away when tears appeared, of silence that followed honesty. So the body learned to hide, but what is not named does not disappear, it waits. It settles into the chest as heaviness, into the stomach as tightness, into the shoulders as constant effort, and one day it speaks through exhaustion, through irritability, through distance, through sudden floods of emotion that feel too much. Naming an emotion is not weakness, it is a return. When you say quietly, I feel lonely, something in the body softens. When you admit, I feel ashamed, the nervous system exhales. When you allow, I feel afraid, the heart loosens its armor, because emotions are not enemies. They are messages delivered by sensation. They are signals pointing to needs that once had no voice. To name them without judgment is to tell yourself, you are allowed to exist as you are. You do not rush to fix the feeling. You do not argue with it. You sit beside it like you would sit beside a child who is crying without demanding that they be cheerful first. And in that presence, something changes. The feeling begins to move, not because you pushed it away, but because you listened. This is how emotional maturity grows, not through control, but through companionship with your own inner life. When you stop shaming your emotions, you stop shaming yourself. And when you stop shaming yourself, you stop accepting love that requires you to disappear. You begin to choose relationships where your feelings are not inconveniences, but information, where your vulnerability is not a burden, but a bridge. And slowly, the inner war quiets. What once needed to shout, now only needs to be heard. Stop negotiating your worth for connection. At some point, many of us learned that connection has a price. Not spoken aloud, but felt. A subtle lesson absorbed in the body. That love comes when you are easy. That closeness stays when you are quiet. That belonging is safer if you are useful, agreeable, small. So we begin to trade pieces of ourselves. Not all at once, in gentle, invisible ways. We swallow the sentence that would reveal our truth. We soften the boundary that would protect our rest. We smile while something inside tightens. We say, it's okay, when it is not. And we call this compromise. But often, it is disappearance. When you negotiate your worth for connection, your nervous system is not seeking love. It is seeking survival. It remembers a time when being fully yourself meant losing something precious. A caregiver's warmth, a parent's attention, a sense of safety, a place in the room. So the body learns to stay lovable, stay acceptable, stay unproblematic, even if it costs you your voice, even if it costs you your needs, even if it costs you your truth. Over time, this becomes an identity. You become the one who understands, the one who adjusts, the one who gives more, the one who waits. And from the outside, it looks like kindness, but inside, it often feels like quiet grief, because something essential is always missing. You, not the version that performs, not the version that adapts, but the one who has preferences, limits, longings, tenderness, anger. Oh no, this matters to me. When you abandon that self to keep someone close, the connection may remain, but intimacy does not, because intimacy requires presence, and you cannot be present where you are not allowed to exist. The tragedy is not that others benefit from your shrinking. The tragedy is that your body learns to confuse love with endurance. It begins to believe that pain is proof of depth, that effort is proof of value, that staying silent is proof of maturity. But secure love does not grow where one person is constantly translating themselves into something more convenient. It grows where truth is welcome, even when it trembles, even when it disappoints, even when it says, "This hurts." Stopping the negotiation feels terrifying at first because the old fear rises. If I show who I really am, I will be left. And sometimes people do leave, not because you became unlovable, but because the relationship was built on your self-erasure. And that is not loss, that is clarity. Every time you choose honesty over approval, your nervous system learns something new. I can exist and still belong. Every time you hold a boundary and remain gentle, your body updates its memory. Connection does not require disappearance. And slowly your standards change. You stop being impressed by intensity. You stop mistaking attention for care. You stop romanticizing inconsistency. You begin to recognize safety, not as excitement, but as calm, not as obsession, but as steadiness, not as proving, but as being received. You no longer ask, "How do I keep them?" You begin to ask, "Can I be myself here without shrinking?" That question alone transforms your relationships, because the moment you stop negotiating your worth, you stop auditioning for love. And one most important thing, become honest about your patterns. Most of us believe we are choosing our relationships, but often we are recognizing them. There is a feeling that arrives before logic does, a familiarity in the body, a subtle sense of, "This makes sense." Even when the mind already knows it will hurt, we call it chemistry, but the body calls it memory. The nervous system is drawn to what it knows how to survive, not to what is healthy. So you may find yourself repeatedly pulled toward distance, toward emotional unavailability, toward people who give just enough to keep hope alive, but never enough to let safety grow. And you tell yourself a story, "I just have bad luck. I attract the wrong people. I give too much." But patterns are not accidents. They are unfinished sentences from childhood. If love once felt unpredictable, your body may confuse anxiety with passion. If affection came after you performed, you may feel unworthy when it arrives freely. If closeness once included shame or fear, calm may feel unfamiliar, even boring. So you chase what hurts, not because you enjoy suffering, but because it feels like home. Becoming honest about your patterns is not an act of blame. It is an act of tenderness. It means sitting with yourself and asking gently, what kind of emotional weather feels familiar to me? Chaos, silence, distance, being needed but not known, and then asking something even braver. When did I first learn that this was love? Not in thought, in the body, in the tone of voices that shaped you, in the way comfort was given or withheld, in the moments when you decided without words who you had to be to stay close to the people you depended on. When you see the pattern clearly, it begins to loosen. You stop romanticizing the wound. You stop calling intensity depth. You stop confusing longing with compatibility. You begin to feel the quiet warning in your chest when something familiar is actually harmful. You begin to notice how your shoulders drop around those who are emotionally steady, how your breath deepens when you are not being evaluated, how your body relaxes when you are not trying to earn your place. This awareness does not make you cold. It makes you free. You do not judge your past choices. You understand them. You see the intelligence in how you survived, and then you choose differently. Not because you force yourself to, but because your nervous system finally believes it deserves peace. Patterns lose their power the moment they are met with compassion instead of shame. And in that compassion, your future relationships begin to form around who you are now, not who you once had to be to survive. And also practice emotional responsibility. For many of us, emotions were once dangerous. If we expressed them, someone withdrew. If we showed them, someone mocked. If we needed too much, someone became tired of us. So we learned two extremes, either to carry everything alone or to hand our pain to others and hope they would finally make it disappear. Neither is freedom. Emotional responsibility begins when you realize that your feelings are real, meaningful, and worthy of care, but they are not weapons and they are not debts. They do not make you broken, and they do not make others your healer. To practice emotional responsibility is to sit with your inner world without abandoning it and without exporting it. It is the quiet courage to say, "This is what I feel," without saying you caused all of this. It is the strength to admit, "I am triggered," instead of declaring, "You are the problem." Not to deny harm, not to excuse mistreatment, but to recognize the difference between what is happening now and what your body is remembering. Because sometimes the reaction is larger than the moment, not because you are dramatic, but because the moment touched something old, a wound that never received language, a fear that never had protection, a loneliness that learned to live in silence. Emotional responsibility is learning to hold that truth gently. You do not punish yourself for feeling. You do not drown others in what you feel. You learn to contain it first, to breathe with it, to say inwardly, "I see you, you make sense." And then, when you speak, your words are no longer sharp with desperation, they are clear. They sound like, "This hurt me. This matters to me. I need this to change. I am not okay with that." Not accusations, not explosions, but truth standing on its own feet. This changes relationships in subtle but powerful ways. People feel safer with you, not because you never feel deeply, but because your feelings do not arrive as storms they must survive. They arrive as information, as invitations to understand, as bridges, not battles, and something else changes too. Your self-respect grows. You stop waiting for others to regulate your worth. You stop hoping someone else will finally carry what you were forced to hold alone. You become a home for yourself, not a perfect one, but a steady one, a place where emotions are allowed to exist without turning into shame or blame. This is maturity, not emotional silence, not emotional control, but emotional ownership wrapped in compassion. And when you live this way, secure love begins to recognize you, not because you are easy, but because you are real, not because you are untroubled, but because you are responsible with your truth, and that kind of presence feels safe to stay with. And very most important thing is that stop proving your value through sacrifice. Many of us learned early that love is something you earn, not something you receive. You earn it by being useful, by being patient, by being understanding, by staying quiet when something hurts, by carrying what is heavy so no one else has to. So sacrifice becomes your language. You give time you do not have, energy you have already spent, forgiveness you have not yet felt, understanding you were never offered, and people call you kind, strong, selfless, but inside something slowly empties. Because when love is built on sacrifice, your worth is always conditional. It depends on how much you can endure, how little you need, how well you disappear. You begin to believe that exhaustion is devotion, that pain is loyalty, that staying, no matter the cost, is proof of depth. But this is not love. This is survival wearing the costume of virtue. You were not born believing that your needs were too much. You learned it. In moments when your feelings were met with irritation, when your sadness was inconvenient, when your anger made others withdraw, when your tenderness was unanswered. So your body decided, "I will be easier to love if I ask for less. I will be safer if I become necessary instead of honest." And slowly, you turned yourself into an offering. But secure love does not grow in imbalance. It cannot rest where one person is always giving blood to keep the heart beating. Because what is built on depletion eventually becomes resentment, or numbness, or quiet despair. And often, the people who accept your sacrifice do not see your worth more. They see your availability. They learn how much you can tolerate. They learn that you will stay even when you are hurting. Stopping this pattern feels terrifying. Not because you suddenly become selfish, but because an old fear rises. If I stop giving so much, I will be forgotten. If I rest, I will be replaced. If I need, I will be rejected. So you keep bleeding gently, calling it love. But the moment you begin to protect your energy, something sacred happens. You discover that your value does not increase when you suffer. It is not created by endurance. It does not grow through neglecting yourself. It is already there, quiet, whole, unconditional. You begin to say no without explaining your existence. You begin to rest without apologizing. You begin to ask without rehearsing. You begin to leave situations that require you to shrink. And some people will not understand this new language. They were comfortable with your silence. They benefited from your exhaustion. They loved your sacrifice, not your soul. Let them misunderstand. Secure love does not need you to collapse to prove your devotion. It does not ask for your health in exchange for its presence. It does not confuse your suffering with your worth. It meets you standing, breathing, visible, whole. When you stop proving your value through sacrifice, you stop auditioning for love. You stop bargaining with your nervous system. You stop confusing being needed with being cherished. And for the first time, you make space for a love that does not feed on your exhaustion, but grows beside your aliveness, quietly, gently, without costing you yourself. And create safety inside before seeking it outside. Many of us go into relationships looking for a feeling our bodies have never known. Safety, not excitement, not intensity, not obsession. Safety, the kind that allows the shoulders to soften, the breath to deepen, the heart to rest without standing guard. But when safety was missing early in life, the body does not know how to wait for it. It searches in people, in attention, in being chosen, in being needed. And for a while this works. Someone's voice calms you. Someone's messages steady your thoughts. Someone's presence quiets the noise inside. But when they pull away, even slightly, the old terror returns. Not because they are cruel, but because your nervous system has no home yet. So it clings, or it panics, or it shuts down, or it becomes someone else to keep the connection alive. Creating safety inside does not mean becoming cold or independent in a hardened way. It means becoming familiar with your own inner weather, learning the language of your body, the tightness that says, I am afraid, the heaviness that says, I am tired of being strong, the restlessness that says, I do not trust that I will be held. It means responding to these signals with care instead of criticism, with curiosity instead of command. You begin to slow down when your chest tightens. You place a hand where fear lives. You breathe where the child inside learned to hold their breath. You stop demanding that another human become your nervous system, not because you don't need connection, because you no longer use it as anesthesia. You let loneliness be felt without turning it into urgency. You let longing exist without turning it into self-betrayal. You let discomfort rise without turning it into panic. And slowly, something remarkable happens. Your body begins to trust you. It learns that someone is finally listening, that someone stays when emotions come, that someone does not disappear when you are overwhelmed. That someone is you. From this place, relationships change. You no longer search for someone to rescue you from yourself. You look for someone who can walk beside you. You no longer tolerate inconsistency because you cannot bear to be alone. You tolerate solitude because it no longer feels like abandonment. You begin to recognize how calm feels in the body. Not dull, not empty, but spacious, clear, honest. And when calm becomes familiar, chaos loses its magnetism. You stop calling anxiety chemistry. You stop calling tension passion. You stop calling unpredictability depth. You start calling peace attractive. This is how secure love enters your life, not through hunger, but through readiness. Not through clinging, but through grounded presence. When safety lives inside you, you do not beg for it outside. You recognize it, and you protect it, and you choose people who can meet you there. Because love is not meant to replace your nervous system. It is meant to meet it in peace. Secure love is not found through effort. It is recognized through readiness, when you no longer confuse chaos with passion, or distance with mystery, or suffering with depth. Emotional maturity is not a finish line you cross. It is a relationship you build with yourself. It is the quiet decision to stop running from your inner world, to stop explaining it away, to stop demanding that others carry what you have never been taught to hold. It is choosing presence over performance, truth over approval, safety over familiar pain. You will not always get it right. You will pause too late sometimes. You will shrink again on difficult days. You will fall back into old patterns when you are tired or afraid. This is not failure. This is being human. What matters is that you return to your breath, to your body, to your boundaries, to your worth again and again, and slowly, without force. Your relationships will begin to mirror the respect you practice inwardly, not because you demanded better, but because you became safer to be with. Not perfect, not untouchable, but honest, and that honesty becomes the ground where secure love can finally grow, quietly, steadily, without fear, without losing yourself.